Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. Spurs have woken up on what is day 14 at the time of recording, but day 15 for our listeners on audio during this January transfer window. They've got one over the line in Conor Gallagher, and one more is expected soon to follow. If you're for the first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. I've got one man you never thought you'd see on a transfer show. Jason McGovern is back alongside me, but remember, the only reason he's here is due to the guest that we've got, and the player is holding or in the shirt. Before I bring Jason in, we're delighted to welcome back to the show, just to give you a glimpse of what the last 6 months has been like at Spurs. Since he's last came on, they've changed the manager, they've changed the chairman, they've won a trophy. It can only be Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. We've got the brilliant broadcaster, journalist, writer, the superb Darren Lewis is blessing us with his presence. Dal, how are you? And as always,
very well indeed. It's a real pleasure to be on. And it's funny, actually, because I was thinking about all those people that have gone. I was thinking, was it something I said?
You know you're loved on this show. It's very bizarre because obviously with the Spurs community in general, I mean, you can see it with managers how we don't take to everybody. But, you know, for someone out there in the neutral world now that you are as a writer, you are loved on this show. And it always feels like we're bringing you always on here at the point of Spurs being in some form of a crisis. Is that fair?
Well, my timing is absolutely horrendous. So it's really me rather than you. But you're absolutely right. Every time I come on, there seems to be some kind of crisis. As you guys know, excuse me, but having covered Spurs for so long, you know, I've got the affinity. There are lots of people who say, "Are you a Spurs fan?" And I'm always very coy about what team is my team. But I do have that affinity because I've covered you guys for so long, because I've seen the ups and downs, because I've seen the opportunities that you've had to really build on, for example, a great first half of the season under Harry Redknapp. You could have brought in Carlos Tevez and Gary Cahill. You brought in Ryan Nelson and Louis Saha, and all that promise went to dust. I remember being on the plane on the way back from the Champions League final. You could have signed Bruno Fernandes. You'd balked at the money, and suddenly, you know, he goes to Manchester United. Okay, you know, it's a bit of a mess over there as well. But, you know, these opportunities that you guys have had to really build on promising opportunities that present themselves, and for one reason or another, all that hope just turns to dust. So, you know, I'm still there willing you guys on, willing you on.
I know, you always are. And again, you always offer real good value for money whenever we get you on here, Dal. So it's an absolute pleasure. Back alongside me, everyone knows how much I miss whenever this man's away from us. He was in Thailand for a little while. I was captain days till he came back. And I know he doesn't normally ever like coming on during the transfer window because he absolutely hates speculation. He absolutely hates noise. He's probably picked the wrong club with it being Tottenham. But even, Jason, I was going to try and bring you back on a day of positivity. But the sporting director's left within 3 months of coming back. So just a regular day of Tottenham in our lives.
You told me it was an Ashes inquest pod. You told me we were talking about Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes and things. You didn't tell me this was Tottenham related.
Well,
you lied to me.
The general view was how I got you on here. I was like, we haven't told him how we've got him on here, but he's on here. But, you know, in general, Jace, never a dull moment, right, at Spurs. There's always something going on, and it feels like a massive week in general, right, both on and off the pitch with regards to Tottenham.
Just another crazy week in the life of Tottenham. It is never dull, never a dull moment. And, you know, there we are watching a London derby semi-final tonight, thinking, you know, those two clubs, you know, despite the fact Chelsea are sometimes a basket case, look how much better off they are than us. And, you know, it's just sad times at times, mate, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, look, we want to start with the show on a bit of positivity. Before we do, if you can, for us out there, as always, guys, you're always tremendous in your support for the show. If you can like, hype, subscribe to the show, that would always be greatly appreciated. We are recording at a time where Spurs have made their first signing of this January transfer window. Conor Gallagher is a Tottenham Hotspur player, and he's reported to have signed a 5.5-year contract with the football club. He's been formally unveiled as Thomas Frank's first recruit of this January transfer window. He ticks, for many out there, the exact description as to what Frank needs. He asks for players for the now and the long term. You feel Gallagher certainly fits that model. He'll quickly become a leading voice in that dressing room, both on and off the pitch. He sets the tempo in terms of the way the team will hopefully want to play. Crucially, if I just ask you about this, Jace, he does tick that big box of being a homegrown player, and he immediately takes the shirt of Brennan Johnson. We'll start actually with you, Jason. We'll go to Daz next. Thoughts, Jace, on Conor Gallagher, a Tottenham player, 25 years old, in the peak of his career. It's funny because I've seen a mixture on this actually online with regards to fan reaction, but I've got to say, I think he's exactly what we need for the present. Do you agree, Jace, at the moment? We'll get you to unmute.
Yeah, I think he's a very good signing. I'm not massively a big fan of Conor Gallagher, but he certainly improves what we've got. So in fairness, I think we're in the stage where we have to improve what we've got before we go and think we can go and get absolute top class talent. So from that point of view, it's a good signing. From the point of view that, Bergval's out for a time, Bentancur's certainly out for a long time. He'll bring much needed energy, drive. I think, for a club that, that I always want to play on the front foot, he's certainly a non-stop pressing machine, Conor Gallagher. So from those point of views, I think he improves us. I suppose probably where the criticism, not so much the criticism, where perhaps people aren't quite excited, as we wanted the real ball playing number 10 type role, and I don't think Conor Gallagher's that. But like I say, he certainly improves the squad. I think he's a 7.5, 8 out of 10 signing rather than the big sexy signing we wanted. But fair play. We thought he was going to Villa. We had a need and we just went and got it done, which maybe in the days of Daniel, we'd be trying to take it down to the 31st of January and trying to throw in 15 tracksuits and various other options into the deal to try and get him and arguing over a packet of Spanish ham to knock the price off. So at least we've gone and got it done. We've asked for that. And at 34 million, probably for a player of his profile, that's a pretty good price anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, Dale, to bring you in, and lovely to have you back on the show. He's claimed it was a very easy decision to join Tottenham. I mean, in the past, when this move has been mooted and we've had you on the show, I think the general feeling is that he would never have moved if it was from Chelsea to Tottenham. By the fact, of course, in there is a period at Atletico Madrid, has been playing majorly regularly over this last 12 months, but certainly was a favourite of Simeone at the time of joining. What do you think Spurs have got themselves in the signing of Conor Gallagher? And do you believe it's the right signing at the right time when you look at Tottenham's squad right now?
I think he's the right signing at the right time when you look at the squad right now, not just because of the injuries that Jason's been summing up so well, but also because right now Tottenham need energy in midfield. Tottenham need leadership in midfield. Tottenham need players who can fight. It's all very well going and having a tear up at the final whistle like Pelini the other day, but they need players who are going to go in there, get their foot on the ball, pass it, drive it, take the game to the opposition. And Conor Gallagher is that guy. I remember, and this is quite a key thing here, I think it's a massive thing for Conor Gallagher to say yes to Spurs, knowing what that is going to bring, not just from the Chelsea fans, but also from the Tottenham fans as well, because of his connections with that club. And when I tell you about his connections with the club, I'll just tell you a very brief story about when I went on tour with Chelsea the season after Conor had a really good campaign with Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. And they were desperate to keep him. Patrick Vieira really wanted to keep him, and they brought him in, and he was sitting in the room with us, and he was telling us about how he loves Chelsea and how his parents, they brought him up their Chelsea daft, and he was really committed to working under Thomas Tuchel. But as we now know, the new owners came in, they ripped it all up, and he didn't get that chance really, or enough of a chance to go back to Chelsea and play regular first team football, which is what he would have done, certainly what he wanted. But at Spurs, he will. You have to assume he's been given assurances that he's going to play regular first team football because he's 25. Okay, you can say half the season's gone. He's probably not got that great a shout for the World Cup, but he'd want to put himself at least in the conversation. And I think if he has a really good second half of the season, he can potentially do that. But what I do know is that as a player, you are going to get energy, you're going to get heart. I haven't seen enough heart in that Chelsea midfield. And you, Jace, everyone watching, we have seen Tottenham midfields in the past with heart, with energy, with creativity, with players willing to put their foot on the ball and pass it and not be afraid of the opposition. I haven't seen that. I certainly haven't seen enough of it in the last 18 months or so. And that is what Conor will bring to the table for me.
We'll just bring Jace back in.
Just on that. I hear what Darren said. I actually don't think he'll have a big problem at Tottenham because of his Chelsea side, because, he's not. I don't think of him so much as an out-and-out Chelsea player in the same way that I think of as, Drogba's and Michael Essien's and Lampard's and things like that. It's not like he's played 250, 300 games for Chelsea and won, 7 or 8 titles there. I think I remember him mostly, if anything, as a Palace player, where he really made his mark in the Premier League. And just looking there, 72 games for Chelsea. He's played 51 for Madrid. So I don't think of him as that hard. I know he captained Chelsea, but I don't think of him as the out-and-out Chelsea player. And he hasn't come straight from Chelsea. So if I go back, Gus Poyet, for instance, I don't remember too many people had a problem with Gus Poyet coming. And, even William Gallas came, didn't he, from both of the clubs, and I don't think was despised for it in that way. So I think I think Chelsea fans will dislike him for it, but I don't think he'll get too much criticism of being a Chelsea player from Tottenham. And I think our need anyway is, do you know what? So be it if he's come from Chelsea. I'd gladly go and sign. I'd gladly go and sign William Saliba if I could do, whether he's played for Arsenal or not. So, I'm at that stage. I don't care where they've come from.
Well, to be honest with you, Jace, I think as well, Chelsea fans will be unhappy that he's not.
Yeah, they will, for sure.
They love one of their own. Certainly if he flourishes at Spurs, there'll be a few unhappy Chelsea fans who say, not playing for us.
Mason Mount's another one that I think of still as a Chelsea player, played in that Champions League final and things like that. Whereas Gallagher, I don't really think of it. I just think of him as a multi-club player at the moment, in fairness.
It's interesting. Apparently, Thomas Frank was the man who made the personal call to get him through the door. What's also quite interesting, Dow, is that we'll come on to, again, Thomas Frank a bit later in the show, because that's going to take its own direction, that conversation, based on what we were talking about in the green room. But quite interestingly, this is a player that Spurs have followed for a number of years. It was reported that Ange Postecoglou and representatives from the different agencies at the time in that 2-year period Ange was here, Spurs tried to get that deal over the line a couple of summers, and also there was up to 8 calls between the two respective camps. That's how much respect they had for Conor and wanted to bring him to the football club. So this one, look, we'll come on to it a bit later on in terms of Frank's role in this. Whilst Frank has had the conversation, I think it's being billed as much as a bit of a club signing. But Frank, apparently, has been very much driving this in this last 24 hours to convince the player to pick Tottenham over Aston Villa. Just on that aspect of that, Dow, because I think there's a lot of Villa fans out there that maybe are quite surprised that, given where Spurs are in the league, that Conor has taken that call to join Tottenham over Villa. There's no doubt about it. Conor will definitely get more regular game time at Spurs. That's 100%. But when you look at the trajectory right now of the two football clubs, and I'm not ashamed to say this because I'm going to be honest about it, when you look at Spurs league-wise, manager-wise, even I'd say structurally of the board right now, as a player, are you surprised Conor Gallagher has picked Tottenham over Aston Villa? And look, Spurs have got a history there, don't get me wrong. Many would probably say Spurs are a slightly bigger club than Villa. I might be getting myself into trouble by saying that with Villa fans. What do you make of that for you?
Well, listen, I don't mind being a little bit vulnerable here and saying I was once on a TV show alongside a player, and I was, me shouting the mouth off and talking about how I thought X player would go to Y club because that club was in a better position or was in Europe and this, that, and the other. And in the break, the player said to me, "Do you know?" This was a long time ago, but he basically said, "You say all of this, and you need to understand players tend not to go to clubs for the reasons you think they do. Sometimes it's stuff you don't even talk about on the television, like kids' schools for their kids, or their partner wants to live back in a particular city. or they might want to play regular first team football, and the superior club, the club that's in the Champions League or whatever, they are saying you can come to us, but you've got to fight for your place. And that might not suit the player. Obviously, sometimes it's the wages as well. There's lots of different reasons. And we were having a really good chat about this. And, you know, I think it really applies to Conor, because there is a lot of competition for places in that Villa midfield, which is why they are where they are in the Premier League, in Europe, in the FA Cup as well, going great guns. Why they've got such a formidable home record as well. They've got good, very consistent players in that squad. And Gallagher at this stage, he's 25, he's getting into his prime. He wants to play every week, and he gets into your team because there isn't enough quality in your midfield. And so I'm not surprised that he's decided to go to Spurs. And I think he could well be a really, really a signing that's going to move you on, because at the moment, Frank has inherited a squad, really, that is a squad of underachievers, a lot of players with their heads down, a lot of players who, you know, were sulking of various things from the past, and he needs to shake it up. I think by the time, in about a year's time, I think that there'll be a half that team at the moment, maybe even squad, won't be there at Spurs. There are a lot of players at Spurs that are not good enough to be there.
Yeah, I think that's been the general consensus on the show. Before I bring Jason back in, that there is a degree of feeling out there, Dal, that the squad is nowhere near the level what Tottenham fans would want it to be, or know it has been in the past. That Spurs in the past have had flair players. They have had players, you know, again, you look at that Pochettino side they had, of course, where if you look at the Spurs' current squad, I mean, it's with no disrespect at all whatsoever, it's hard to even look at really one player even getting into that formidable Pochettino team at the time. And I think there's a definite acknowledgement that there needs to be an upgrade in several areas of the pitch, no doubt about that. But I think we'll kind of come on to it later, because, again, that confliction around Thomas Frank is whether he should be getting more out of what the current squad is at the moment. I think it was quite interesting, just to come back around to you, James. You said something quite interesting at the opening point there when I asked you about Gallagher, that, you know, I made that point. He ticks several boxes for Tottenham in terms of what they need right now. But the biggest question is, I suppose, does he answer that question, what we need in the future? Because you were talking about the fact of having a progressive passer in the squad. Is that still an area you feel that definitely needs to be addressed during this transfer window? Whilst Conor, like Darren rightly says, and I agree with him, he offers energy, he's a fighter, he is going to give us a lot of, you know, leadership, definitely both on and off the pitch. Is there that concern for you, like you've already seemed to have alluded to? It's still an area that Tottenham need to go and strengthen in terms of that particular role we're after.
Well, there's various bits to it. Just on the thing that he chose Tottenham, did he choose Tottenham?
Fair
because did
well,
Atletico actually accept Aston Villa's offer?
That's a fair point. But also there's a case that at the same time,
he might have been able to persuade them to accept Villa's offer, but from what I can see, Atletico Madrid much preferred Tottenham's offer, so gave him permission to talk to Tottenham, whereas they hadn't given him any permission to go and speak to Villa at that point. So, you know, it's Atletico Madrid that have chosen Tottenham over Aston Villa rather than Conor Gallagher. But that's a small technicality. I think we do need a progressive passer, but does Thomas Frank want to play with a progressive passer? And, you know, if you go and sign one, what does it do to the futures of Maddison and Kulusevski? Only the club know how badly those injuries are. Only the club know the possibilities of both of them coming back to a certain level. If they both come back to a certain level, do they want to go and spend 70, 80 million on another progressive passer and then end up with three in the squad that you know, then they think, Jesus Christ, now we've got too many of them. So there's that balancing act. We certainly need one on the pitch right now. But like I say, a proper club has to take the long-term look at the thing rather than just making signings for now. And, you know, I go back to it. Matisse Tell is a prime example of us rushing into a signing. Matisse Tell, don't get me wrong, may well be a really good little player in a couple of years' time. But if you look at what Matisse Tell has done over the 12 months we've had him, that's the type of deal that I don't want Tottenham to do in the January window. Just go and sign anybody for the sake of it without thinking of where we actually go with a signing like that. So you're a little bit up in the air. If Tottenham could get a progressive passer on loan, so be it. But I don't want one of these loans with an obligation to buy and then up stockpiling players that you still think in 12 months aren't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring you back in there, Dale, I know you were keen to kind of come back in maybe around how Spurs have got this deal done and the negotiation element to it. It feels that Spurs, and we'll give them some credit here because I don't really give them a lot of credit on this show, they appeared to move fairly quickly when they knew of other clubs' interest. They've offered they offered Atletico Madrid, like Jason said, maybe exactly what they want in terms of the conditions of the deal. And furthermore to that, I'm sure Conor Gallagher is on a very decent wage, which in the past, let's be honest about it, Tottenham maybe have huffed and not paid, quite a big wage for a player where, unfortunately, in today's world, if you want to bring in top quality players, you've got to start paying top quality wages. So where are you on that, Dow, in terms of the way Spurs have navigated their way to this deal?
I agree. I agree with everything you just said. I think I go back to September, and Vinay Venkatesham gave that video statement, didn't he? Very soon after Daniel Levy left. And I remember at the time actually thinking, this is really good, because this is someone who's now, say, taken over. I use that term loosely, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. And there's a line of communication with the fans. Daniel was he just didn't speak enough to the fans. He did a lot in the background, and obviously spoke to the Supporters Trust and all those means, but there wasn't enough dialogue with the fans. And this was really good from Vinay. And he was saying, listen, we intend to be, I'm answering one of the other questions too early, but he was talking about the fact that they're going to be ambitious in the transfer market. And for you to have got this deal done today, the 14th of January, you're moving away, as you said quite rightly, from that nonsense around waiting until the last week or so of the window and then ferreting around the bargain basement. Every Spurs fan is fed up to the back teeth of that, bringing in players that are raw, untried. I think Jason's absolutely right. He's undercooked. He's not ready for Spurs. There are a number of players that I think the club have brought in over the last 18 months, not ready for Spurs. Gambling, trying. Odegaard, another one, not ready for Spurs. Decent and promising, and maybe will come good. But, I kind of feel like Spurs has to be the club that get to a place that Arsenal were at. And forgive me for mentioning the old enemy, but I remember when Arteta went in there, and he just got rid of so much dead wood, so many underwhelming players, so many players that hadn't hit the ground running, they hadn't impressed, or they felt the club owed them a living. They're moaning about this, moaning about that. Get them out, because you have to be hungry to play for a football club as big as Spurs, a club that's had Chivers and Greaves and Hoddle and so many legendary footballers over the years. You are a massive club, and you have to want someone who's got the enthusiasm and the energy and the joy that Conor Gallagher has when he says, I want to come and play for you. I want this challenge. And so many of these players, I see them come and I just think, they're just thinking, okay, I'm here, now what? I don't see it. So I think that it's a good acquisition from the club. I think they've moved quickly to back up what they've been saying about going out and getting the players to be ambitious. I'd expect at least another couple. You need a stronger squad. Your squad is not good enough at the moment. And if you can get that, you've got a chance.
Yeah. Listen, we'll have to wait and see in terms of what else is going to be coming for Spurs. I don't want to put the knockers on this because Jason mentioned earlier our current status with injuries. I think we're up to 8 out, and that includes, of course, Bentancur, who is now gone for surgery. So he's now going to be out for 3 months as well. I read something crazy earlier. I think Spurs have had the most players injured or out with illness more than any other Premier League club. That's not to excuse what we've seen in terms of performances on the pitch this season, but again, it does aid to the fact of just how much Thomas Frank is trying to juggle different circumstances, again, playing a number of games per week. And I know we're going to have a very interesting discussion on Thomas very, very shortly. But the good news about Gallagher is up until now, he has not had a single injury recorded in his entire senior career. And I am aware that Anthony Costa has right now probably blocked my number and will never, ever call me back after I said such a thing on air. because he'll go, Rick, what have you said? What have you done? But it's true. It's a true stat. We said there, Spurs at the moment, we understand they are in the process of finalising a deal for Souza. He's expected to be next on the list. He's undergoing a medical. I think 13 million deal that's going to be done. He's going to provide the cover in the squad for Destiny Udogie. I don't even know much about him, Dal, but he seems to have had a bit of a shining light in where he's been playing in Brazil. I think he's had to face quite a difficult time at his current club, Santos. They were battling relegation last season, and I think he's seen by many as some of the right mentality to come into a club that are currently fighting fires. So, basically from one circus to another, I think, for him.
Well, pretty much, and I think you've summed it up really well. I mean, the attitude appears to be good, but is he robust enough? Does he have enough quality? This is the toughest league in the world, and there are lots of players who look technically good in other leagues, and goodness knows you guys have got a long list of players. I was trying to remember, and somebody might be able to help me. There was a striker. I remember I used to do a transfer show for the Daily Mirror. There was a striker that you guys were linked with every summer between around 2007 and 2011, I think.
Leandro Damião.
That's the one. Thank you. Sorry, I just shouted this.
Leandro Damião, yeah.
I've been trying all night to remember that one ahead of the show, but that's the guy. That's the guy. And every season you didn't get him, his quality appeared to be better. You know, and I've just looked at your quote, some of the comments, and someone summed it up really well. Is this guy another Udogie? Because Udogie is a very good player.
Yes,
or is he Brazilian Carl Walker-Peters? You know, is he where he's promising, but not quite at that level? And that's what you just don't know. And I know, again, the trust, and you guys, you've been very straightforward in conversations with Daniel Levy, kind of saying to him, we don't want untried talents untried is probably not the right word, but we don't want players who are not quite there yet. If you look at the Arsenal side, again, I'm mentioning, forgive me, but when the first team don't play, the B team is powerful, it's strong, it's capable, it's defensively sound. The recruitment is so strong that you have a sense of confidence going into a game when one player slots in for another. With the Spurs defense right now, Souza, he will take time to learn the league, he'll take time to learn the language. There's all sorts of things, obvious things from his point of view, which you have to be fair to him. You have to give him the time to be able to adapt to. Now, is that going to help you or is this just an opportunity to bring in a player who's 19, he's got his best years ahead of him? If he doesn't cut it, you can sell him big and rake in the profit and then move on to someone else. You're 14th in the league. You need quality, and you need players who are going to be robust enough to be able to cope with where you are right now in the league.
Yep. Well, I know we'll close the show down and ask you what you'd love to see Spurs do between now and the end of the window. I mentioned it earlier, and Jason brought it up as well. Spurs, apparently, they've identified the need for a more creative passer from deep, but whether they can achieve such a key signing in this window remains to be seen. They may have to wait until the summer. People have heard that from us the last 7-8 years when it comes to the nature of that last line, so do forgive us on there. We are hearing reports that are suggesting that Brazilian side, Bahia, have an agreement in place with Tottenham to sign Alejo Veliz on a permanent transfer. Spurs will now have to terminate his loan deal with the Rosario Central to facilitate this permanent transfer. Elsewhere at the moment, as things stand, what's been reported is Thomas Frank doesn't really want to allow anybody else to leave the club. Jason brought him up earlier. Matisse Tell, there's been reported interest from Paris FC and also from Italy in Rome. There's been a keen interest in seeing Radu Dragusin go there, and his agent, as we know with Radu's agent, never a quiet man, is very keen to see him go to Roma. But as things stand, and look, again, we are midway through this window, Tottenham would like to keep both of those players. But again, it remains to be seen what's going to happen.
Can I just make a point? Jason, obviously you might be able to shed some more light, but the one thing that struck me, and I've been keeping across these ones, is that all the teams that you're mentioning with the interest of all the teams, none of them are English. None of them are Premier League.
Nope.
And that tells you a lot. You know,
Yep.
there isn't anybody else in this division, the top division, the best division in the world, that is turning around saying, we'll take 10 off your hands. No Newcastle, no Villa, none of the big teams, because these are guys who are going to go to another league, a weaker league, and they'll probably do well. But in the Premier League, they haven't cut it. I've seen Dragostea many times, and he always seems to have a mistake in him. And he might argue that he doesn't play regularly enough to find that confidence, and he'd probably be justified in doing that. But he just doesn't look as though he is cut out for the Premier League. And tell as well, he is still a very young player. I think he's got a couple of seasons of regular first team football before he gets to the level that's good enough for Spurs. But I don't think he's a Spurs player.
Okay, well, look, we're going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. For listeners on audio, taking you into that break, you're going to hear Conor Gallagher's first exclusive interview. Being a Tottenham player, he's delighted to be here. Let's see, he says the same thing in 6 months' time. Thanks to over the 5,500 right now that are joining us on this edition of Last Word on Spurs. I'm joined back alongside me by Jason McGovern. He's only here because of the guest that we've got, and a player is holding up the shirt, a Tottenham Hotspur shirt. We're joined by the superb broadcaster, writer, journalist, Talk Sport's very own, the Mirror as well. Of course, we've got the brilliant Darren Lewis in the house. Look, it wouldn't be Tottenham. It wouldn't be Tottenham if there's no drama, right? And like I say, I will also say out there again for us guys, if you can like, hype, subscribe to the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Whilst it's been their positives, we're going to come on now. Let's be honest about it. We're going to probably lower the tone now. And I'm not going to lie to you. This show could go off a cliff now, like what it's been really since Bilbao. I mean, I'm trying, colour it up. I mean, this is where the news maybe starts to go downhill. 3 months ago, Tottenham announced a new structure in terms of their recruitment model, which saw the return of Fabio Paratici to the football club, where he would be working alongside joint co-sporting director Johan Lang. Now, the idea put to us at the time, or the theory that was being understood, is that Johan Langer would take control on the youth strategic-based transfers, whereas Fabio Paratici would be heading up the senior first-team affairs. And here we are 3 months later, and Paratici apparently now wants to go back to Italy, where he feels that he needs a return there, and is keen to join, currently in a relegation battle, Fiorentina, 18th placed in Serie A. Dale, I'll open with you. You've been around football. I'm not going to age you at all whatsoever for how long. The optics of this don't look great. We'll come on to what's been said by Vinay and with Fabio, but just outside looking in, what do you make of that? Within 3 months of a new structure being put in place in terms of the recruitment structure at the top. Yes, Daniel Levy's obviously departed. I think the wide range view was that, of course, Paratici was very much Levy's man. Therefore, there may have been an element of surprise that he decided to come back. But within 3 months, Dal, it's over.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's two ways to look at this. On the one hand, it does look a little bit of a mess. Paratici had his ban, came back to Spurs. I would argue that he hasn't really, apart from Kulusevski and who was the other player that he brought in that was half decent.
Bentancur at the time. Bentancur,
of course, Bentancur.
Yeah.
I don't think he has been that great at Spurs, but the fact is that after that ban, he came back to the club. And now, 3 months into this new structure, he's going again. And it's not as if he's going to Manchester City or to Arsenal. He's going to Fiorentina. And the other way you could look at it is that maybe it might just be that Venkatesham and Vivian Lewis and her brother Charles and these people who Vinay says are taking a more prominent role in terms of decision making. Maybe they've had a look at it and thought, no, we're going to go in a different direction. And maybe from your point of view, the glass might be half full and that they might have someone else waiting in the wings to come in. Either way, it's kind of symptomatic of where you are right now, which is that the Spurs don't know what they are. They still don't appear from the outside to know what they are, who they are. And to go is one thing. To go in the middle of a transfer window is quite another, because again, that kind of, people use words like shambles, and that is possibly too harsh because, you know, we don't know the full story. But the fact is that for him to be leaving at this point sums up the muddle that you guys almost always seem to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what a lot of people have asked us on this show, is that why would Paratici leave Tottenham, as we've said, they're less than 4 months after rejoining for a club sat inside a Serie A relegation zone? I mean, Jace, to bring you in, I will just quickly read out what's been said by the parties. So Vinay Venkatesham has said that we've agreed that Fabio will return to Italy following the conclusion of the January transfer window in line with his wish to move back home. We thank Fabio for his contribution to the club and wish him well for the future. Our management structure is designed to be resilient to personal changes, and it will be business as usual moving forward. Paratici has said, I want to thank Vinay and the board of Tottenham for accommodating my desire to return to Italy and join Fiorentina. I've loved my time at the club. However, this opportunity, together with the need to be based in my homeland, has led to this decision. Spurs is a club that is very close to my heart. It has great people working for it who are as passionate about the project as I am and want to bring sustained success. I have no doubt that they will achieve that, and I will be watching closely from Italy. Your thoughts, Jace, on the fact within 3 months of him coming back, he's gone?
Well, it's strange how he's got homesick in 3 months, isn't it? I mean, he's been with us how many years, but suddenly he's got homesick. He's got homesick 3 months after taking the job back. So I think that says everything. There's obviously a fallout. He doesn't like the power or the lack of power he's got. Maybe there's tensions that, you know, he's still seen as Daniel Levy's man. But at the end of the day, he's done some good deals for us. But if you look at it, he's basically, the deals that he's done that have worked out to a degree are all from Italy anyway, aren't they? You look at it, Bentancur, Kulusevski, Udogi, Romero, Vicario, you can say one way or the other, but he's a first-team player that's held his place, but it's come from Italy. You know, we haven't had too many successes other than the Italian market under Paratici. His managerial choices, we know he wanted Conte, Gattuso was from Italy, Igor Tudor was from Italy. There was another one, I forget who it was at the time, that I think when Nuno got the job, that was constantly another one from Italy. So, you know, he without a doubt, he's been an expert, if you like, in the Italian market. But I've not seen too much success, with the exception maybe of Mickey van der Ven. The rest of the players, the James Madisons, the Dom Solankis and that, well, you know, you didn't need to be a top scout to see those players, did you? We knew them from the Premier League. So, you know, it's clearly not worked. But whether Johan Lang's got the confidence of certainly of the fan base to be left on his own in the job, we know it went pear-shaped for him at Villa. You know, there's not been too many successes for him. So, you know, I just want somebody at the top of the club or with a senior role in the club that properly understands Tottenham in the way that David Pleat understood Tottenham, in the way that Glenn Hoddle, I'm not saying Glenn Hoddle, but somebody that really understands what Tottenham want. Because as Darren says, we don't seem to know what we are. And I think, you know, there needs to be someone that has a real understanding of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, that be it in a role of a chairman, be it in the role of director of football, be it in a CEO role or something, that properly understands what we are. Because I think part of our poor recruitment is that nobody knows what we are. They don't know what a Tottenham player looks like. And I think that's part of the problem. We genuinely, I mean, there's a name in the thing, a Chrissy Houghton type of, those types of names. I wish that we could get somebody involved from outside that has a real understanding of us as a football club.
Fonseca was probably the other name you were thinking of.
Fonseca, Fonseca's the other one, Daniel Fonseca,
Thanks to the audience for getting involved and participating in that little exercise. There's always exercises when there's Tottenham, right? Active exercises. Now let's bring you in. I think Jason's going to hit the nail on the head there, how a lot of fans are feeling, you know, in general, that there's a real lack, it feels, of footballing people from the top of the club all the way right down. And I think, you know, again, we've had a lot of changes. You've last been on here. Like we mentioned at the start of the show, we've changed the manager. The chairman's gone. They've won a trophy. We've seen, I think, around 12, 11 different heads come and go in between the periods in this last 12 to 18 months or so. So there has been a lot of change at the top. And obviously with change does come a reshuffle. It takes time to really understand what these people are, what they are trying to do. We're going to come on to shortly the Spurs Supporters Trust that put out a statement of their own with regards to their concerns about Spurs long-term, short-term, and that communication concern as of this moment. But we bring you onto the show in less than a fortnight ago where we had Christian Romero, after a Premier League game, appearing to take a deep, deep dig at the hierarchy where he accused them of telling lies in what's been a since edited Instagram post. Now, quite interestingly, the next day when Thomas Frank was quizzed about that Instagram post, he says that it was a mistake. But my understanding is that Instagram post is still up there from Christian Romero. So if it's a mistake, why is that post still existing? And I think alongside that, you had the likes at the time of Porro, Xavi, Richarlison, Dragoshin. Porro replied to the post as well, almost kind of further adding fuel to the fire that there isn't that communication when things aren't going right. And whether it's rightly or wrongly, Romero has brought this up. I've been critical of Romero that I feel he does a lot of talking at times where sometimes his performances aren't near the level. But at the same time, Dal, what do you make of, once again, we had you on this show several times, that disconnect between the players and the board, the fans and the board? Bearing in mind, there's been a changeover where Daniel has left the football club. You surprised me? I'm telling you right now, or was it always going to be this way under what's now being rebranded as ENIC 2.0, the Lewis family, as I think they like to be called?
Well, I think they're two separate issues, because I'm with you. I think that, and this is where our bromance, and I know some of you guys who have been so kind to me for so long, but we might just slightly diverge here, because Romero is a good player who has not maintained his level enough, who has allowed his emotions to boil over far too often. And there are things that Romero has done that I don't think, and I said this pre-match when we were having a little chin wag, and I thought I won't say it on here, but actually I will, because, you know, I've seen enough managers at Spurs and I've seen enough players with respect for managers to know that Romero doesn't get sent off as often as he does, or do some of the brainless things he does for a Guardiola, for a Klopp, for an Arteta, for a manager with the standing, with a greater standing than Frank with respect to him. And I think players should play. I think players should focus on their job. Get your job done right first. Then you can start to criticise the people above. If the team were keeping clean sheets but not scoring enough goals, yes, come out and complain about the leadership, whatever. Listen, for all we know, it might be that he's upset at the fact that they might have promised him that he could go in the January transfer window and he can't go. There's this assumption that Romero is talking about the greater good, the club that so many people on here care about. And no one's actually thought to themselves, is he only thinking about himself? Because there has been interest in Romero from a number of other bigger clubs on the continent, and club have not allowed him to go. But that's not leadership. Just out of interest to the person who's asking me about a scarf, it's very cold in the room that I'm here in a moment, so forgive me. I just think, as far as when you look at the clubs that show leadership, Van Dijk, you know, being prepared to come out and front up when Rooney criticised him, called him out, taking a microphone and speaking Rooney face to face. This is me. This is where I'm at. You know, that's leadership. I don't see that leadership from Romero. I don't see that consistency from Romero. So for me, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yes, he's right to hammer the club. The club have their issues. Everyone on here knows what the club's issues are. But I think as far as Romero is concerned, do your job, fella. If you do your job, the club might have a chance of keeping clean sheets against the kind of clubs that you've been losing and conceding against in the recent past. As for the club itself, listen, like we've already said, the club have talked about aspiring to be better and more decisive in the transfer market. Actually, given that we're a couple of weeks in and they've started to make signings, I'd say they're living up to that. So even on that count, I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, he's right to hammer them. Too many Spurs players are not doing their jobs. They can like messages from Romero, and that matters if they haven't downed tools and seen the club go out of the FA Cup at the first hurdle, or seen the club go out of the League Cup to Newcastle at the end of October. Do your job, then you can start to have a set of circumstances where you call it out the people who run the club.
It's interesting, Jay, because I brought this up to Dal in the back room. I don't know whether you feel the same, that I can sense with Romero, because we've all seen him over these last 5-6 years, that when he's maybe not buying in completely to what a manager is asking him to do, or maybe doesn't believe in what is being asked of the team, he seems to go rogue. We saw that under Conte, where there was a number of, I would say, real stupid disciplinary issues. There was, I think, that early period under Andrew, he got a couple of sendings off, but to be fair, in Andrew's last season, there was an argument saying, well, where's that bit of a devilment streak gone? He seemed to have really, really calmed down. And now suddenly, obviously, under Thomas Frank, there's been, again, a couple of, I would say, tackles in there that, again, you would align yourself to thinking, well, is Romero's head in the game? We've seen him charging up the pitch on several occasions. I mean, does this all link back to, again, Jace, where the squad is at, maybe not being happy with how they're maybe being asked to play? I know we're going to come on to Thomas Frank shortly, but is Romero subject to that? Or do you agree with Darren that, you know, look at your own performance first before you start mouthing off on social media?
Yeah, I think so. It's without a doubt, frustration is behind his inconsistent performances that we see. You're right. When he gets that real rashness and things, it's usually because, you know, he's not happy with how things are. But we also, you get the flip side. I mean, his performance at Newcastle, where he dragged us back into that game. I actually thought he played well at Bournemouth on the night. But like Darren, I'm not a fan of players coming out making statements like that. I remember, 5-6 years ago, I was really critical of Danny Rose when he came out and said it. I think when a club is in the position that we are, you don't bring more noise on the club by speaking about things that aren't necessarily your remit. Fans want to hear it and say, yeah, there you go, he's pointing the finger at the board, but I don't think that actually gets you anywhere on the pitch. And they are entitled to turn around and say, well, you know, if you can't beat Sunderland at home on the pitch, maybe, you know, you players have a thing. If you lose at home 2-0 to Fulham, don't just blame the board for performances like that. We've won, 3 or 4 home games in a year at home. The board can't be solely responsible for things like that. So yeah, like Darren, sort of get your own performances right before you criticise others. And just to highlight that, Rick, you know, that's one of the reasons I don't hide behind referees. I say when you get perfection on the pitch and you pass to each other, then you can start hounding referees. But don't hound referees for one mistake when you make 25 on the pitch yourself. So I'm always like that. But yeah, just concentrate on your game and let the board sort out what they're doing. Fans can criticise the board like we'll do at the weekend with protests and things, but I don't think it's a great look when players come out and start making statements like that, for sure. It just brings more and more noise. So the club in crisis becomes the club in deep crisis, and you don't get out of it by bringing more noise on yourself.
I'm just going to quickly, Jace, as you've just said there, go on, Dad. Do you want to come back on that point? Go for it.
But yeah, just very quickly, I'll make you so right. And I think about over the years, I mean, I remember, listen, the club have underachieved for 2-3 decades now, right? Right? What a player he was at centre half. Did his job, no matter how much disappointment he might have had over the club transfer policy, over Jacques Santini going, Poch coming, Martignol, if I'm right, and you know how Red that, lots of players who the club were linked with but didn't come in or whatever. He did his job. Harry Kane, how much did he commit himself to your club, to your team, season in, season out, when there was so much disappointment, underachievement, lack of investment, but he did his job. That was consistency, that was commitment, that was making sure that he did what was expected of him in a Tottenham shirt. So
Sonny as well.
Sonny, exactly. Sonny committed himself to the club when he could have gone to, I think, any other club in the Premier League. He was that good. in his prime, but he committed himself because he thought about the club. For me, Romero thinks primarily about himself rather than the club. And I know there'll be people who disagree with that, and I accept that. That's no problem. He's a very good player, but he needs to retain that consistency, respect the club, respect the manager, and respect the fact that there is a job to do. If you want to call people out, keep clean sheets first. Make sure that you go up the table. Then you can maybe talk about the lack of investment that's stopping you from scoring decisive goals against teams that you should be beating. But when you can't do your job, I'm sorry, and I'm not accepting, he's frustrated. You're a Premier League player on a decent wage at a massive club. Do your job.
Well, just to roll into that, because following that Romero statement that he made on Instagram, maybe you want to say statement or comment or post, and that was followed up very, very quickly in these last week or so by the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. Now, everybody does know there's going to be a protest this Saturday at the West Ham United game from Change for Spurs. I'll be attending. I think Jace will be probably alongside me there as well for that protest beforehand. I just want to read out, if I can, and just get Darren's reaction to what the Spurs Supporters Trust have stated and what they've asked for from the board's perspective. They said members of the THFC board met with representatives of the club at a senior level to discuss support concerns regarding recent events and the current situation at the club. We stressed the need for the club leadership to communicate direct with fans on these issues. The THFC board has been engaged with the senior leadership of the football club throughout recent weeks and months and has repeatedly raised supporters' concerns with them. Whilst we acknowledge the changes in personnel behind the scenes at the club, this has regrettably not been matched with the improvements on the pitch. There also appears to be a dramatic fall in ambition for the football club, as evidenced by, at that time, the transfer window to date. Now, Spurs have signed Conor Gallagher. I have to say, obviously, of course, after this statement has come out. And this is obviously by repeated statements by Thomas Frank, reminding supporters that the club finished 17th in the Premier League last season, that the club is only participating in the Champions League through winning the Europa League, and that Bournemouth, a side without a win in 11 games, are always a difficult team, and that he is not enjoying the job. Supporters have suffered the embarrassment of players directly confronting them for exercising their right to express themselves, and of the club captain publicly calling out other people at the club who do not speak except to tell a few lies, and the manager being photographed drinking from an Arsenal cup, apparently unaware that he was doing so. Whilst these incidents may have explanations that we could understand and even sympathise with, they demonstrate a lack of understanding and a lack of care about the perception of the football club. We reiterate to the club that we believe the club leadership should address these issues publicly and through direct communication with fans. We stress that fans need to hear directly from the club leadership the ambition for the football club for this season, for next season, and for the foreseeable future. That begins, but it is certainly not restricted to this transfer window, in which all stops need to be pulled out in order to demonstrate that Tottenham Hotspur are a serious football club and that we really do want to win more often. Now, again, I will make that point. Tottenham have, of course, signed Conor Gallagher in this last 24 hours. But Darren, what do you make of that statement from the Supporters Trust? I know, again, you've quoted and commented on them on a regular basis in your time covering Tottenham. Is there anything unreasonable by what they've stated there, do you feel?
Not really, no. I think that the club, the trust, do a really good job of representing the concerns of Tottenham fans, and they've done a really good job in that statement. There's a couple of things, but they're only really very small things. I'm not that bothered about the cup thing. He's in a match. He is in a game. Someone hands him a cup. You know, think about it. You're in that situation. Somebody hands you a cup. You don't take a second look. You just drink from it. You know, we're all grown men and women.
Darren, I'd spot that.
What? But you're saying you'd spot that, right? But
100%. You've got to have an awareness. I'm not saying it's a sackable thing, but there's got to be an awareness of it for sure. There has to be, yeah.
Our romance is going to slightly fracture a little bit, but I will try and keep it intact. I think that of all the problems that you have as a football club, actually, I'll put it in a different way. The trust talk about something that is very significant for any manager that goes into any club. PR. PR is so important. Even when you're struggling, messaging, and I work in the you could argue PR profession, in terms of the framing of things. And it is true to say that Frank has made a number of mistakes, and he will learn from. He's made the step up to a bigger club, right? There will be people among us who, and those watching, who will have got a promotion or gone to a bigger job, bigger role in a bigger company or whatever. It takes time to get your feet under the table, but he's got to do it in the glare of everyone, right? And he has made mistakes. He has not really appreciated the way that a club the size of Tottenham, in the locality and the fan base and the history, the way it should be talked about. He's come from Brentford that aren't even quite literally in the same parish as Tottenham. So there is a lot for him to learn from that, and he's learning it. So I want to try and be fair to the guy.
Yep.
But of all the problems that you've got, that the trust so articulately set out, the cup thing, I think you could forgive him that. I do take your point, Jason, but I just think you're focused, you're under pressure, your results aren't good, you're in a match, your team aren't doing as well as you expect. You send them out in the second half, and that you demand better, you're getting better, you're watching players, you're seeing that they're doing the job that you asked them to do. Someone hands you a cup. It was the Villa match, wasn't it? Am I mistaken? Was it the Villa match?
It was the Bournemouth game, wasn't it? It was the
Bournemouth
game.
Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Because they'd been there the game before, hadn't they? So that's obviously where it originated from.
And somebody hands you a cup, you take it. I think I'm not looking at what's on that cup. I'm taking the cup because my eyes... Look, I'm talking to you. If someone were to hand me a cup now, a drink, I would take the drink and I would keep looking at you. Yeah, and I think that was the case. I don't think that's something that you can kill the guy for, and I don't want to do that on here. What I do want to do is basically just give a little bit of context around him. He only managed to win one of his first 10 games at Brentford, 2 of his first 14 games at Brentford. And if you go back to Brøndby, he won one of his first 15 games there. Yeah. And just to give you a little bit of context around that, Glasner last season at Palace managed to win one Premier League match in the first 5 months of the season. And in the second half of the season, they won the FA Cup. They went on to win the Community Shield. They're above you in the table right now. They don't have anything like the resources that you've got as a football club. So I think people need time. And I feel a little bit of sympathy with Frank in that we are in an era, particularly with the social media, which turbocharges everything, where you just don't get that time right now. But where everybody is right, where the trust are right, where you guys are right who are watching. I've covered Spurs, as you know, Rick, for many, many years, where Tottenham's home ground has been a fortress, and there's nowhere to hide for a manager who cannot win matches at home. And that is where Frank has to do better. He's got to be more front foot. He's got to be more committed to attack. You've got to be scoring more goals. The style of play has to be better. All of those things are right. And if you aspire to being at a better club, and this is where Frank doesn't have too much to hide, he gave a round of interviews towards the end of the season before he came to Spurs. And he was making it very clear to people, I am ready for a bigger club. I'm ready for a bigger challenge. And I remember at the time, because there were lots of people hammering Ivan Toney for saying the same thing. And yet Frank had said that, I want a bigger club. Now he's got a bigger club. He has to know how to speak at, in terms of a club like Spurs. He's got to know how to relate to the fans at a club like Spurs. Even Ange Postecoglou with the nonsense around, what was it? With the North London derby and he wanted
the whole Man City narrative at the time.
He got it completely wrong. PR at a massive club like Spurs matters, and he's got to understand that. But I do think that if you give him time, he will do something there. He started each of his last 2 clubs. He deserves time, and he deserves better players. You've had 9 managers in the last 8 years. How many more managers can you go? And if you were to go, and this is a question for the people watching as well, who do you bring in?
I think that's I mean, look, I do. We're going to squeeze in our final break of the show for our listeners and audio. That's where we want to close the show on. We're going to close the show and give them a roundup in terms of what Dal might think we might do towards the end of the window, and can Thomas Frank turn the situation around. It is a big next couple of weeks for him. Of course, we've got a massive London derby against West Ham United. It's being billed as El Sackico. How ironic that the man that suffered the sacking on El Sackico, of course, Nuno Espirito Santo, could be the man that, if he was to inflict a defeat on Thomas Frank, could see Thomas Frank lose his job. But it goes back to what Darren said there, that if you are sacking Thomas Frank, what are you doing? Because at the moment out there, we have to be honest about it, there is no interim midfields waiting in the wings. There is no Ryan Mason. There is no Matty Wells. There is no almost Tottenham coach that is, you'd say, around the staff, whether they would look at someone like Justin Cochrane, but again, he's been Thomas Frank's number 2. That's what we're going to turn to next. Listen, thanks to the over 7,500, nearly 8,000 that are watching us live. We're joined by Jason McGovern, and we're joined by longtime friends of the show, 7-8 years in. We've somehow managed to keep this relationship going. Don't ask us how, depending how you feel Tottenham's relationships are in general. We're joined by the superb broadcaster, writer, journalist. You hear him on TalkSport, of course, Mirror Football as well. He pops up on Sky whenever he gets 5 minutes, which is always a busy man, especially during this period. We're joined by the superb Darren Lewis. Now, before that last break there, I got to say again, to viewers out, if you can, for us, keep liking, hyping, subscribing to the show. That's greatly appreciated. You did rightly there, Dal, beforehand, give the context behind just how much of a step up that is the role for Thomas Frank. But when I read to you where we are under Thomas at the moment, and I know a lot of people have heard the Frank stats before. I mean, they're not pretty reading right now. You know, he's statistically Tottenham's worst manager in the last 20 years. He's so far accumulated 31 matches, 12 wins, 8 draws, 12 losses. There's a points per game average of 1.32, which is lower than, of course, the average of one day Ramos. And that stretches back 20 years. You know, he's lost 7 of his last 13 matches. We're out both the domestic cups. We're languishing in 14th. We've only won 2 wins at home in this season of the Premier League. Newly promoted Burnley, and of course his former club Brentford, who kind of sound Brentford for those that aren't aware. Brentford, I think, are on track for a club record Premier League's points return. Brentford are averaging 1.57 points per game with 17 games remaining. Keith Andrews' side are currently on course to pick up another 27 points. Now, again, it's a long way to go. That would see them end on 60 points, and that would break the club record of 59 set back in 22-23 when Brentford finished 9th under Thomas Frank. And remember, that's a Brentford side that lost Mbeumo in the summer. They lost Visser in the summer. You know, they've lost some really key personnel there. And the set-piece coach has gone in there and has got an uplift. Now, whether it's, again, back to the way Brentford are, the structure of the organisation, I've got no doubt that plays a massive part in it. But, Dal, I'm sure you agree, those stats that I've read out there on Thomas Frank, the points per game, the losses, the 2 wins at home in the Premier League, I mean, pretty damning, would you say?
They are damning. You can't hide from those. And the interesting thing about Frank is it's kind of something we say about a lot of the clubs like Brentford, like Brighton. You can go 2 months without winning at Brighton or Brentford, then you can pull off a couple of good wins against top 6 sides. And everyone says, isn't he doing an amazing job? But then when you make that step up to a big club, because on the back of all of those garlands and all of that praise, you get the opportunity. You suddenly find that there's no place to hide. There's a big difference, though, between Brentford and Spurs. And I think the culture at Brentford is more collaborative. There are more people who are committed to doing well. Everybody knows that if you perform well on a consistent basis at a Brentford, eventually you get your move to a big club, whether you're a player or you are in the coaching staff. I think as far as Spurs are concerned, I said before that Spurs don't quite know what they want to be, and Frank is suffering from that at the moment. I think there is a demoralised squad there. I think there are one or two players there who kind of feel like Spurs owes them a living. And those players, I think, need to be moved on. I think Spurs, what you need in that Spurs squad is players who are more hungry, who are more prepared to look inwards than keep blaming other people. It's the board's fault. It's the manager's fault. It's this fault. I've seen one or two players I can't remember what the game was, but I think it was a Chelsea game where you had a couple of players disrespecting the manager.
Yeah, Van der Ven and Spence.
That's the kind of thing when I talk about culture. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You can talk about Brentford, but at Brentford there is a terrific culture, a terrific collaborative culture where people go there and they are willing to fight for the club. Why? Because there's leadership on the pitch. He's brought in Jordan Henderson, which has been a fantastic move because Jordan Henderson is his experience on the pitch. He's his voice on the pitch. I look at Spurs. Who is that voice on the pitch? We've started this whole chat by raving about Conor Gallagher because Conor Gallagher will bring in that leadership. That's an indictment on Romero. Everyone says, oh, he's a World Cup winner. Well, where is that leadership from him? Van der Ven's a superb player, but I think he's too quiet. And then I don't know where else in that Tottenham team there is that leadership, that motivational performance that gets everyone fired up. So you can't compare Spurs to Brentford or any of those other clubs. Spurs need leaders. Spurs need an injection of quality. Spurs need to purge that squad. Stick with their manager. Sorry to say, stick with the manager.
That's your feeling, Darius. Of course, you're feeling how you feel. Yeah.
And actually build something, because I think if you do stick with that manager, and I told you about his poor starts at Brentford and Bromley.
Yeah, Bromley. Yep.
Do stick with him and build something. You've got the potential. And listen, learn from Nuno. 17 games he lasted at the club. Everyone said, oh, it's too boring, it's too this, it's too that. He took Nottingham Forest to the brink of the Champions League. And Forest didn't have a better squad than you did. But the club stood by him.
Yeah.
And I think that Spurs need to do that with Frank.
I think, listen, you make a very good point there. I just think, and again, I don't mean to any disrespect to Forest, that I just wonder, and again, Jason might agree with me, you might disagree with me here, I'm not sure how tolerable that football would be in terms of what got Forest to the Champions League. Look, they were on the brink of it. They did ever so well, don't get me wrong, in terms of the performances they put in, the nature of how they got to where they got to. But I've said this before, I think 5 out of the last 8 managers that have been at Tottenham have been defensive-minded managers. How you dress that up. And I think, again, having been a Spurs fan for God knows how many years, and you'll know this as well, covering Tottenham for a long time. And Jace, again, bless you in terms of what you see Tottenham's DNA. The one thing that immediately gets you on side as a Spurs manager is, in my opinion, playing a front foot brand of football. And look, I think Ange, I said this before with Ange, I think people think it's disrespectful when I say I wouldn't take Ange back. I always said that I respect Ange. I love the fact he delivered us a trophy. But I love what Ange wanted us to be. I have to be honest and say, as many people know, and Jason knows this, I was. I mean, there were so many red flags to the way he wanted us to play that I was unconvinced over a sustained period we could be what Ange wanted us to be. But I totally agree with the way Ange wanted us to play. I think, Jason, one of the biggest red flags that you raised, and again, this has been raised by a lot of viewers and listeners that have listened to the show and have heard you talk on the appointment show of Thomas Frank. You wasn't questioning whether Frank was a decent manager or a decent coach. Your concern was, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your concern was whether the fact that he seems to kind of be very much about what the opposition are going to do by not having a clear style and a clear blueprint and identity, how that would manifest at a club like Tottenham. Is that fair, Jace? And I'll get you to unmute.
Yeah, that was always my concern. My concern was always around the playing style, that even with Brentford, even though, I think there's a misunderstanding of Thomas Frank that attacking football means the number of goals you score. It's not, you can score goals on the counter attack. I think Thomas Frank's teams genuinely don't want to control the game, don't want to control the ball. They're happy to let the opposition has it and then exploit the weaknesses in the opposition. Whereas I think the top managers in the game, and I'm not just talking about Tottenham managers, the top managers all want the ball, and they all have a certain plan A that they start with, that this is how we are going to exploit the opposition, and they fall back on that. And I think Thomas Frank's a reactionary man to whoever you play each week, and that was always my concern. That doesn't make him a bad manager, incidentally, but that's why I always called him Danish Moyes. But like we said off air, I never meant that in a disrespectful way to Thomas Frank, because I think David Moyes is a decent manager as well. But I think even now, David Moyes will look at his side and think, how do we stop the opposition first? And I think at certain clubs, you need to say, no, look, we're at home, certainly in our stadium. Like I say, that Sunderland game for me was when you play front-footed in the first half, and let's be honest, half-time within our groups, we were all quite happy, saying this is much better. We could accept our lack of quality, that we didn't score 3 or 4 in that half, but the intent to go and play on the front foot, and then to immediately come out in that second half and say, right, we're standing off Sunderland. We'll let a newly promoted team, however well Sunderland are doing, we let a newly promoted team come to our stadium and pass the ball around without ever trying to go and confront them. I think that was a really poor thing. And whether we, even if we'd have won that game, if we'd have seen that game out 1-0, I'd have still been as angry as I was. It wasn't the result that made me angry. It was that we watched a newly promoted team like Sunderland come to Tottenham and just pass it around. And then you see Villa with 65% of the ball at home. That's not good enough for a Tottenham Hotspur team. It's not good enough for a Chelsea team. I don't think it's good enough for an Aston Villa team or something like that, or a Newcastle team, to just be giving up that much of the ball at home. And there's no doubt about it, that came from Thomas Frank at half-time, to drop off, let's be solid and things like that. And it's just not, for me, how you would do it. And, you know, when people talk about the stars of football, they say, there's always the thing thrown at you, oh, you'd sooner see us lose playing fancy football than win grinding results out. We know in the course of a season you have to grind results out. We know away from home, sometimes you've got to dig in and win ugly. We're not saying you've got to play fancy football 38 games a season, but I firmly believe if you get a consistent level in your performances, that those performances lead to certain results. And that's what I want to see. I'll gladly accept that we won't win 19 home games a season, but playing football the way that I want to see it, with a certain thing. I think if you win 12 or 13 games a season and you draw 3 or 4 at home, then you're not going to be too badly off on that table, and then that gives you a platform to go from. But changing game plans every single week is not a way that I think you'll ever get a consistent level of performance. Not at a club like Tottenham anyway.
Do you think, Dale, based on what Jason's alluded to there, if he's given better players, will there be an adaptation to Frank in the second half of the season? Because, I mean, I only go by, look, I listen to a lot of different Tottenham podcasts out there. I listen to a lot of different voices out there. I think Danny Kelly's a great voice that's out there, of course, on TalkSport. I know you've worked with Danny many times, of course, on TalkSport as well. I don't want to age people as well, categorise them, but you know what some of the, I would say, more experienced Spurs fans would love to see Tottenham do. I think you've made it very clear, and I agree with you, Dal, throughout this show, the players simply are not up to a level. And yes, we've had more injuries than anybody else in terms of the Premier League. But can you see there being a real genuine adaptation, a progression to Thomas Frank, when, with all due respect, at Brentford, he was renowned, and he said this before, about setting up special operations for teams to go and get the wins, of the likes of the teams up at the Big Six, where he's not looking there, as like Jason said, to go and control the ball, but he's looking to nullify them when they're on the break. I mean, can you see a way in which there'll be a dominant Thomas Frank side at Tottenham in time, Dale?
Well, I think that Jason's absolutely right, that Thomas has to improve the style of play. His job depends on it. Basically, it's not going to be over the next couple of seasons. He's got to do it in the second half of the season. And if he doesn't, then he can't have any complaints in terms of the fan reaction to him. What I do think is that you can go front foot football and have a good, strong, solid defensive base. Mauricio Pochettino, I remember when he took over at Spurs, the joint best defensive record in the Premier League with Man United in his first season, and the second season, it had the best defense outright. And those players, Danny Rose, Jose Font, who was the other one at centre half? Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah, it's fine. You mean
Toby and Yan.
Toby and Yan, and obviously, of course, they had Kyle Walker on the right-hand side.
Kyle Walker on the right. Yeah. And then in front of them, Moussa Dembele and
Wanyama.
Victor Wanyama.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic back six. And I just think that he still went on the front foot. He still played terrific football. It was still a pleasure to watch, to cover Pochettino's teams. And that was fairly quick. And as people have been saying, and as Jason's been saying, it isn't just in terms of the way that Frank sets up. It's about, as I said before, the way he speaks about the team as well. The mentality has to change. What I would say is that if they are investing in players for Frank at this stage, that would suggest a degree of confidence in him. And but that can only be based on the kind of football, because he can't keep losing matches. And if he were to lose to West Ham, I think that would really push him towards the exit door. You cannot be losing to West Ham full stop as a Tottenham manager anyway. But to be losing to this West Ham, which is a really poor side at the moment, at home, I think he'd be in real trouble. So, yeah, I think Jason's right. It's got to change. It's got to be better. It's got to be more positive. It's got to be more front foot. As a Spurs supporter, you have to have a better experience watching Tottenham. And right now, and these are all things Frank would know. And he will have a lot of sleepless nights over this. But I just think that at the same time, he does need that time, because his record suggests that when he has that time, he does better.
Dale, I know I'm conscious of time. It's been a great show, and we're going to close very, very shortly. I just want to ask you, because again, you've been in so many different press conferences of managers. Maybe just give viewers and listeners a view out there of how different that would be. I mean, it's no disrespect at all, and I hope you understand from the place I'm coming from here. When you describe what it had been like for Thomas on a Thursday or a Friday, going into the Brentford pre-match press conference or post-match press conference, and then maybe the compare to what it would be like going into a Tottenham press conference at the moment, just by the nature of the type of questions that is being asked and the amount of people that are asking the questions. Because I would imagine at Brentford, I didn't watch every Brentford press conference, if any at all, there probably wouldn't be too many questions around the style of play or the conviction with the ball, because for them it was more about maybe results more than style. Whereas at Tottenham, as you know, covering the club for so many years, for a lot of fans out there, the style, whether rightly or wrongly, is maybe, just as important as the results, or maybe equally on par. So how difficult will this be for him right now in terms of that transition? Like you said, he's learning all the time. He's maybe made mistakes in terms of what he said. But obviously the one thing that fans have picked up on the fact that he keeps saying over a number of press conferences that the team finished 17th. That can't be good for the players to hear. They did win a European trophy. No one's getting away from the fact the squad needs improvement. But as a group, when you keep hearing that, we finished 17th, what can that be doing to a squad? Again, I relate it back to how he feels probably those press conferences are different. How do you feel that is, Dal?
Well, it's a really good question. And, I can talk now from having 25 years in national newspapers, I should say, and media, and say that for him to still be saying that, to mentioning 17, it's a strategic mistake from him. And because when you keep mentioning that and your team is 14th, you're not really saying that the team hasn't improved. You're not in a position to be able to talk about that finishing position. His predecessor delivered a trophy, the key to the Champions League. What is the shining light from Frank being 14th in the table at the moment? Not that much. And I think as far as Frank is concerned, he'd be better advised to be saying, I understand what Spurs fans are saying. But to your point, when he was at Brentford, the press conferences would have been a lot smaller. He could have spoken for half an hour. And I remember this when I used to cover clubs like Charlton when I started in Ipswich and over. When you're the manager at a club that's smaller like that, you can talk for an hour and you'll probably get that much in a newspaper. But when you're at Spurs and you're asked about an important player, you're potentially talking about back page material in terms of your answer. So it's got to be the right message that you're sending, not just to the fan base, but also back to the dressing room as well, also up to the leadership as well, also out to the wider fan base beyond this country. We have a global game right now. And I don't think Frank, which seems really bizarre given, he's a terrific manager.
He's such an intelligent guy. That's what I find. He's such an intelligent human being. Yeah.
But to be making these very basic strategic mistakes, it's really, really baffling. And the fact that he is on, I keep saying he's going to pick it up. And I know there is not a lot of people who are prepared to hear that. But I think it will help him far more in terms of picking it up if he gets the right messaging in terms of where Spurs should be, because that is so utterly crucial. And I know there are one or two managers who, they speak directly to fan bases and they engage and find out, take the temperature of what the fan base is saying, because they understand the need to be able to do that. But as far as Frank is concerned, he's got a lot of work on his plate. He will have gone into those press conferences at Tottenham. There will have been more people in the room. There would have been more questions about higher profile players, about the style of play, about the expectation on the club. You can't be 14th in January and expect a press conference to be a comfortable one. If you're a Tottenham manager, if you're Brentford, there's perception that maybe that's around about where you're going to be. You don't have the resources of a club from North London, but when you're a Tottenham manager, no chance. So it will be different for him. It will be harder for him. It will be more intense for him. I do know that with a lot of the guys, he's been giving them time. He's been really, really kind in terms of and generous in giving them the opportunity to ask him questions outside of the press conferences as well.
Yep.
But it's just not working. And he's got to change one or two things about the way that he speaks about a club that has a fantastic tradition, massive fan base, big expectation. And, a feeling this season, they're only 8 points off the top four, that it's still doable. But he's got to change a couple of fundamental things about the way that he does this job right now.
Do you feel, Dad, I'll bring Jason and I ask him about this week coming up, do you feel there is still enough rope left to be able to show why he should be given the opportunity in the summer to, once again, have an opportunity to bring in better quality players? I mean, look, we are halfway through January. They've got Conor Gallagher over the line. Looks like they're trying to get Souza. There's been talk of maybe trying to bring in a playmaker, the likes of an Akliouche, for example, who I think would most certainly be a benefit to Spurs in terms of what they're trying to be, what they're trying to do. You're gauging that for you. I mean, you said there, if he was to lose to West Ham, you feel that would pretty much put him on the brink?
Well, if he were to lose to West Ham, the London Stadium will just be a beer pit.
I'll tell you, it's at the top. It's at the top Hotspur Stadium. I can tell you.
Sorry, the Tottenham says at London Stadium.
Yeah. Listen, they reckon they've billed this as the two most unhappiest fan bases in the league at the moment. In the Premier League.
Honestly, the Tottenham Stadium will just be. I intended to stay. I knew it was at home, but the Tottenham Stadium will be a beer pit. The reason I thought about the London Stadium because I was at the game where at the London Stadium where it all kicked off, and fans stormed the pitch and. Called it the Battle of London Stadium, and I was remembering that day as being quite striking. I don't think it will be that bad at the Tottenham Stadium, but I do think it will be horrible for Frank if you were to lose to West Ham, who a little bit of a bounce, decent win the other day, albeit a bit against QPR in the FA Cup, but they'll come in with a little bit of confidence, and I just think that Tottenham have got to go front foot. They've got to show a bit of confidence in this particular game because really your season depends on you finishing in the Champions League places. if you were to lose, I think he's in real trouble, right? But football is just an insane sport. I remember when Daniel Farke, the Leeds manager, earlier this season was one or two days, let alone games,
it's crazy that. Yeah.
From being sacked, and now he's on a 7-match winning run or something. We've all, the people listening, you, Jace, we've all seen insane things happen in this sport. And it's not inconceivable that he could win a couple of matches and go on a terrific run. So I think it's not a question of whether or not I don't even know if it'll be long enough if he were to lose against West Ham to be thinking about making the top 4. I think West Ham is a pivotal match because the noise will be deafening if he were to lose that match.
Dan, I'm going to come over to you to close in a second. I'm just going to go to Jason. Jason, to bring you back in, everybody knows the stats around the fact that we've averaged 10.2 shots per game. It's the lowest since the 97-98 campaign. We've had, I think, only 4 teams have had worse than us in terms of touches in the opposition box. We are, like I say, 16th in terms of that regard. We've had 25 errors from Spurs players having led to shots on our goal. Again, to try and bring that balance, I will say we've had injuries being a key theme again for Spurs this season. They've lost the most amount of players, Spurs, to days of injuries and illness out of all the Premier League teams. But again, 10 points from the last 12 Premier League games, 3 wins in 4 months. The home form is shocking. I think we've lost 37 games since the start of last season. So don't let the players escape criticism here. But when you're having Villa fans at the weekend singing Thomas Frank, he's an Arsenal fan, and you're getting sacked in the morning, and then the Spurs fans are joining in, and then there's been chants of sideways and backwards everywhere we go. Just how important is this game against West Ham United in terms of what's riding on it? Is this the defining game, Jace?
I don't know, because I still get the feeling that if we lose it, they may well sack him in the summer, but I don't get the impression that it will get sacked straight away. I think with West Ham, our confidence is low, particularly at home, and I think there's a genuine lack of belief at home. So I don't expect to go and see free-flowing football, or as Thomas calls it, free-floating football. And I accept it's not going to be great, but what I do expect to see is the intent to play it, the intent to get on the front foot and do it for 90 minutes, not for 45. I don't want to see us at any stage in that game letting West Ham have the ball and backing off into our own half. That's not good enough, because West Ham are lacking confidence and belief, and we can't be doing the same things that we did to Sunderland. So that's got to be the minimum to go and to at least try to play that way. I accept that it may well be a scrappy 1-0 win because we're lacking in quality, but the intent has got to be there for sure. But and then the same at Burnley. When you go there, I think any hope of getting higher up the league depends on taking 6 points, because if you can't take 6 points from those 2 games, and then you got Man City, Newcastle, Arsenal, Man United in the next 4. Jesus Christ, if you don't take 6 from those games, then you're looking at a paltry return. I'm probably slightly different to Darren, that even if he was to go on a run and win the next 4 or 5 games, my fear is the football's never going to be the type of football that we want to see. That if we do get 5 wins, it will be sitting off, trying to hang on, and time wasting and players diving to kill time. I don't really want to see that. But it's important that we get 6 points, mate. It really is, because I fear that the long-term thing, that I'm not even sure the decision hasn't been made already, if I'm honest. I think even if you get 6, I don't think those board will think are the fans really going to get on board if we beat West Ham 2-0? Are the fans really going to get on board if we beat Burnley 2-0? How many fans that are in the position of knowing we're watching crap will change? Because if we then go and take 6 points, but he sits off of Manchester City, and he sits off of Newcastle, and he sits off of Arsenal, and picks a back 3 like we did at the Emirates, and packs midfield with players that, leaving Xabi Simons and that out, I don't think it's going to change the perception of Thomas Frank. So, it's important to get 6 points. We have to. I've probably written off the Champions League, but we have to be trying to get European football of something next season. God forbid it's the European checker trade, but we have to be seen to be trying to get European football, that's for sure.
Dale, I want to close with you. We're going to hopefully have the pleasure of having you back on in the summer. I mean, bearing in mind, since the last time you've been here, we've changed the manager, we've changed the chairman. I say changed the chairman, the chairman's gone. We've lost the sporting director. Yes, we've had a player come in. It's just non-stop change all the time at Tottenham. Maybe I'm wrong to ask you this, hand on your heart right now. Do you think next time you're sitting in that chair, probably around the summertime, are you still talking about...
Just quickly, there's a question there that's come in the chat. Do we really want him to win? Yes,
so funny.
We do want him to win. We do want to beat West Ham, and we do want to beat Burnley, and we do want to win 6 games in a row. I'm not as anti-Frank to say I hope we lose to West Ham through goals. You never want your team to lose, ever.
It's not.
That it's funny actually, because that had crossed my mind. I wondered if there were people who were so anti-Frank that they wanted a negative result at the weekend.
I'm sure there's some out there, Dale. I'm sure there is some out there because some are done already.
If you love the club, you want the club to win, regardless of who the manager is. You want the club to do well. You want the bigger picture for the club to be a positive one. You can get on board with the result, with the style of play and whatever else, but you want your club to be in the big competition so you can acquire the big players. Do I think that Frank will be the manager next season? Is a very good question. I have to say, sadly, that I don't, only because the depth of feeling towards him is so strong. If he had a better squad to help him out of this situation, I think he would have a chance. But the combination of bad injuries to key players, inconsistency from the players that he's got at his disposal, bar Van der Ven, Udogie, Porro is honest, even though he's not of the quality that I think you've had in the past. He's no Carl Walker. He's good. He's decent,
that's
but
fair.
he's not Carl Walker.
Yep.
There are too many areas in the Tottenham team right now that I think are not good enough. I do just want to, you said rounding off.
Oh, listen, you can carry on as long as you want, Dale.
Well, no, it's just funny that the one or two people have said on the chat something that I put to you guys just before we came on air, which is that possibly the biggest option that might present itself if the US don't do particularly well in what will be, let's face it, a mess of a World Cup if anyone's keeping across events on the other side of the pond. If Pochettino were to become available and this ownership group were to turn around to him and say, we will give you the funds to go out and get the players you want to rebuild our defence and to get the players in to get up the league, I would snap their hand off if I were a Spurs fan.
Yep. There's a lot of people down that feel the same. I mean, there's a lot of people that would love Pochettino to come back. I think, Jason, your concern has always been whether he'd want to come back and do a similar job, Jace, to what he's done before. Is that fair? Do you still feel that way, Jason? I've not really asked you about that. Do you still feel that way, given just the disconnect? I mean, I just feel with Poch, just to let you come back in, I feel at the moment that Spurs fans are crying out for some kind of connection with the football club. There's no Sonny, there is no Kane, there is no, with all due respect, star player. We hope Xavi can be that player in time. And I know he didn't win a trophy here, but I have to say that for the period that he was here, that a lot of joy people got to go Spurs week in, week out was they loved the manager at the time, Mauricio Pochettino. I don't think personally he's done his reputation by any real damage going to Chelsea because he didn't win anything there and he left after 12, 18 months. And the reason why he left
was... Do you think that was the last time you enjoyed watching Spurs?
Yes, genuinely, yes. The last time I enjoyed watching Spurs, don't get me wrong, I'd say bar the first 10 games of Ange, I thought that football was exhilarating. Unbelievable. I wouldn't sit here and say that the Ange football at the start was wasn't unbelievable those first 10 games, but bar those games, and of course I enjoyed Bilbao, despite how terrible people will tell you the final was, that the Pochettino era, you went in every single week feeling you're going to win the game. You went into every London derby knowing you're going to turn up. The feeling I got under Thomas Frank, being honest and putting everything out there, I go into every game under Thomas Frank now thinking we're going to lose. And that's a horrible feeling as a football fan when you go into every game at the moment thinking we're going to get beat. I don't want to feel that way, but that's the way I'm feeling at the moment. I just think Pochettino, he got us. He did get us. And I appreciate he went to Chelsea, but people need to remember, Tottenham didn't want him. Spurs didn't pick up the phone to Maurizio. So I also appreciate if fans wouldn't want him back, but I think a lot of people look at Pochettino as somebody that absolutely, for whatever crazy reason, loved the football club. He loved us. You ask him, I don't know why he loved us, but he absolutely adored and loved the football club. Jason, I'll let you come back in and we'll go to Dale, and we will let Dale close us on this show.
Yeah, you know my fears for it, that, you know, he's being asked to do exactly the same job that he did last time with none of the benefits, you know, of taking a team to a Champions League final. We're miles away from the team that he left, if you like. And I just think there is still an element of people that say, yeah, but he had the best team and we didn't win. So there is a little bit of doubt for some people there. But without a doubt, the football in the Premier League era, that he's been the manager that probably gave us the most amount of enjoyment. Although Harry did for a couple of seasons as well, didn't he? But I just think it's a really tough ask for him to come back and do it. I would prefer to bring somebody else in that fits our style of play, but I do think that Pochettino coming back might be the one person that can try and reunite people at the club and get people on board. I see the sense in bringing him back. I also see the disadvantages, but he wouldn't be number one on my list, but he'd certainly be on the list to consider for sure.
Yeah, it's a real difficult one. I mean, you can see even like the live comments coming to the show, it's a real confliction of opinion. You know, some are saying Pochettino isn't a winner, but then Ange Postecoglou won a trophy. And as you know, there was a massive split in terms of whether he should have got season 3. So it's fair to say it's going to be an interesting next few months now, isn't it, in terms of how this does work out? Because, you know, in the summer, you're going to have the likes of Nagelsmann available, Pochettino, of course, available. Obviously, Maresca's out there as well. So there will be a lot of managers come the summer after the World Cup now that will be available, right, for interview.
Say again, the World Cup. Say that last bit again.
Yeah, I'm just saying there'll be obviously a lot of managers after the World Cup available for interview. The likes of Tuchel, the likes of Nagelsmann, the likes of Pochettino. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that all these managers are going to come to Tottenham, but what I'm suggesting is it feels like there will be a lot of managers that will be available in the summer. The other thing that worries me about Pochettino, if people do want Pochettino back, is that, you know, the World Cup goes on really much until kind of end of July. So, I mean, then I don't know how that even would work in terms of pre-season and how you'd even get around that. It's got its complications, doesn't it, really? That in itself has got its complications.
It does have its complications because the last time you took a manager from the World Cup was Jacques Santini, if I remember rightly.
Probably.
And that lasted 5 minutes. So I'm not quite sure that's obviously Pochettino would be different, because I think Pochettino could build a defence. And actually, I don't think that there is too much that you need to do. In terms of the back six, Pochettino would keep a Conor Gallagher. He loves one of your own. Pochettino would get them disciplined, and he was no mean defender himself, so he would know what it takes to be able to build a back six. And I do get the whole feeling that you can never normally go back. But at the same time, he would understand. He gets the club. And that's so important, that you get the club. The style of football is important. There's no point at this stage of where Tottenham are in them aspiring to get a Tuchel, who generally goes to clubs who have the finance and the capability to win leagues. Yep. Nagelsmann, similar. You know, he's managed Germany and Bayern Munich. So he's had a high caliber of player to work with and squad to work with. I can't see that being the case. I've seen lots of people suggesting Robbie Keane in the comments. He's at Ferencváros at the moment. He's got a good spirit at that club. Yep. Is he ready for a Tottenham? And can you afford to take a chance, given that there are other teams now at this stage in danger of getting into the Champions League and disappearing over the horizon? If Aston Villa make it, Unai Emery, you know how good he is. He will strengthen that squad. I can't see them falling out of the Champions League next season. You've got the obvious contenders, Liverpool, horrendous season so far, and yet they're still in the top four. Arsenal will definitely be there. Man City will definitely be in there. Man United can't possibly be as bad as they have been this season. Spurs can't afford to get this wrong. They can't. And so it's either a high caliber appointment that comes in and gets the funds to do what it needs to do, or it might be somebody who gets the club, knows the club, understands the fan base and how to work the media, because it is a package and Pochettino's got that package. It's a question of whether he would be up for it.
Yeah. A lot of questions. I mean, that's always the case whenever you leave a conversation with Tottenham. A lot of questions to be answered. One question that we know always is answered on this show. Darren, you are superb. We love having you on this show. Dal, for anybody that, of course, follows you and wants to know what you're up to at the moment, quickly tell them where they can find you, what you're up to. I think it's always a crazy time for you wonderful people out there during this transfer window. What you're up to, Dal, at the moment?
Well, I do a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily on sport anymore. I do a lot of stuff in the news agenda as well. But I'm on @MirrorDarren on Twitter, Darren Lewis 5 on Instagram as well. And obviously I do 1 or 2 interviews with CNN as well. Yeah, I'm around. You can find me.
Now, you've been a star. I have to say, whenever we put out the headline that you're on this show, the amount of love we get back for you is unbelievable. Bearing in mind, again, there's a lot of journalists out there that are, Tottenham fans. I know, again, you're very great in terms of the neutral aspect to it. I think, again, that's why people love having you on here, because there's a neutral aspect to it. It's refreshing when, again, because obviously we're all Tottenham fans, with something gross in the football club, when somebody like you from, again, the outside is looking in, sometimes you get a bit more of a unbiased opinion. So, look, loads of love pouring through for you here. Jace, thank you so much as always. I'll be seeing you at the weekend. Crucial game against West Ham. We'll see what's to come. Dal, thank you. Thank you to the over 8,500, 9,000 nearly that have been watching us live. We appreciate all your support as always, guys. Tottenham, they've got one man over the line, Conor Gallagher. We expect Souza to follow and potentially more. From Jason, from Darren, from myself, we've been the last one on Spurs. As always, keep safe, keep well. And, of course, come on, you.